First review of 2025, and it's a January horror movie, so it's rough. Or should I say wolf, because Wolfman. I'm sorry about that, but let's talk about Wolfman. Leigh Whannell is back, reviving and reinterpreting another Universal monster for the first time since his 2020 Invisible Man, which was a great movie. I really enjoyed his fresh take on that story, as different as it was. Wolfman is a reboot of the 1941 classic, The Wolfman, which, once again, it really doesn't have much in common with. The movie is starring Christopher Abbott, Julia Garner, and tells the story of a man trying to protect his wife and daughter from a terrifying creature, only to become infected and begin transforming into that creature himself. I'll give it this, it's better than what we usually see with January horror, but that doesn't make it good. My engagement level with this film peaked at the prologue, which is not a great sign. We start in this beautiful location in Oregon, and we see our main character, Blake, as a child. We get a sense of how he grew up, what his relationship with his father was like, and we see the two of them go hunting, which is where we get our first glimpse of the creature. There is some amazing tension in that scene, layered on top of the difficult father-son relationship, and at that point I'm thinking, we're off to a great start. Is this going to be a solid movie? But then we get the big time jump into our main storyline, and things get very predictable and bland from that point on. We see adult Blake, we see a bit of a weird family dynamic happening, and pretty quickly they are all off on their way to his childhood home in Oregon, hoping a family trip will do them good. It obviously doesn't. They get attacked by the creature, and it's not long until Blake begins acting strangely, transforming, and losing his connection with reality. Here's the thing with werewolf movies, they're actually pretty difficult to pull off, unless you're just a big fan of the concept itself. You either have to make them really entertaining, make it into a fun creature feature, or you really have to go the extra mile with the themes and lean into the metaphors and the horror. This version of Wolfman does neither. And what's worse is that it really spells out its themes in plain dialogue very early on, and then instead of actually developing them or letting the audience go deeper through visual storytelling, it just keeps repeating itself through dialogue without actually exploring things further. It doesn't have the humor and doesn't have nearly as much fun with the genre as something like American Werewolf in London. It doesn't have the story or the tragedy of the original, even though it kind of sort of tries to do the parental angle, but nowhere near as successfully. It tries to sit somewhere between The Fly and The Shining, which are not werewolf movies, but you can see a lot of influence from those two films, and it severely lacks depth and character development to get anywhere near pulling this off. As a result, you end up with a very obvious, predictable, and forgettable story that isn't really awful, but also doesn't have all that much to offer. Mostly, I just found it pretty dull, even though stories about a family trying not to fall apart are generally easy to get into. There are some things that work here though, so here are some positives. I already mentioned the opening scene, which was done well. It was suspenseful and tense, set in a beautiful location. There are also some great looking practical effects in this movie. They try to go for body horror, and when they're going for it, it looks good. Unfortunately, it happens less often than you would expect, especially in an R-rated horror film. They do some interesting things with perspective, visualizing Blake's experience of slowly transforming, not just from the perspective of his family, but also what it feels like for him, and that's one of the very few elements that actually stand out here. Also, Christopher Abbott is really good in the lead role, doing his best with the character and actually trying to bring in some depth and complexity to his performance. To be fair, out of the entire cast, he had the most to work with. I can't say the same about Julia Garner or the girl who played their daughter. The writing for their characters just didn't give them much. It's kind of funny, actually. He's literally there chewing on his arm, looking rough, and the girl is like, "Is daddy okay?" Yeah, kid, totally normal. Nothing to see here. I guess I'll get into the negatives with that. And since I'm talking about the characters and the performances, I just didn't feel the chemistry between the husband and wife that would have made all of this more impactful. The family as a whole didn't give me much, and a lot of that is on the writing. There is a bare bones, fractured relationship that really doesn't go beyond the basic setup, but what's worse is that by the end, it doesn't even properly pay off the parenting conflict they set up in the beginning. All of this is on top of the painfully obvious foreshadowing, and spelling out of the themes doesn't really leave the viewers with much to chew on. Instead, there is a repeated emphasis on Blake being really focused on protecting his kid, which is what his father was trying to do, and the idea of turning into a monster while trying to be protective. It's all very on the nose, and the movie thinks it's establishing something really deep with that, but instead we either get basic horror dialogue or we get characters doing a lot of walking away slowly and staring intensely into each other's eyes. And I get it. I get what they're trying to do here. They are supposed to be meaningful silences, but there just isn't enough there to actually pull this off and for these moments to hit the viewers the way they're intended. On top of all that, some of the movie just looks too dark. You can see some of that in the trailer, and if I'm being honest, I didn't love the visual interpretation of the creature itself. I think the final form looks a little goofy. That's my personal preference though. It might work for you, and I will say that the way they did the gradual transformation did look really cool. I just wasn't a fan of where we ended up with that. Here's the deal. Is it an awful movie? No, it's not unwatchable, but Leigh Whannell's Wolfman is unfortunately a pretty average addition to the subgenre, and considering the amazing year of horror we just had, this is nowhere near satisfying enough to call it even somewhat good. Yes, there are some great looking effects, and the setting is atmospheric, but the story feels uninspired, with characters spelling out the movie's themes in plain dialogue, and the movie going no further than that to actually develop them. Christopher Abbott's performance does stand out, but I wish the movie would at least remember to have fun with its concept, and aside from a couple of cool moments, Wolfman feels bland and forgettable. Look, maybe if you just love werewolf movies, you'll enjoy this more, but for me, it generally takes a lot to get into a werewolf movie, and this one just didn't do it for me. But if you're looking for horror recommendations, I have some really fun ones for you right here.